Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about Radious Total War, to talk about Grand Cathay in Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires, and the wonderful changes that they have made. I would like to mention something that, like many other mod developers, the guys here do focus on making longer campaigns work better. But of course, the core problem of Warhammer 3 is between sieges, AI, lack of an endgame, etc. It doesn't quite work out. That's a game problem, not a mod problem, and is an infuriating issue for many modders that I've spoken to. That Creative Assembly cannot handle its endgame. And it's kind of like Warhammer 3 is one of the very few Total War games that really just doesn't handle an endgame whatsoever or scalability. I mean, it's never been perfect. Now, the reason I say that is because it pushes you into an area as a player where the early game is where the campaign really gets decided. But with certain races like Cathay, the early game really sucks. Not because Cathay is a bad race, far from it, but because you don't have any kind of variety for your units. I mean, think of it. What do you use as Cathay when you're playing an early game campaign? You use Jade Warriors and Jade Warrior Crossbowmen. That's it. You dominate all of Cathay. GG well played in your entire campaign. Radius changes this substantially. And it's not necessarily in the biggest and flashiest ways either. It's in the smaller ways. So let's take into consideration one of the things they do. Look at Xiao Ming. He does have a lot more climate viability than he does in the base game. Wasteland, mountain, for instance, that changes things a lot. So it means that for a very, very long portion of the campaign, or for much of the vast majority of the campaign map, you have terrain that's suitable. It's a small change, but with a huge impact. And that's great. That's a really good thing that Creative Assembly should learn from, if anything, really. The second thing that they do, and this is where really beyond climate change, they really make the early game work substantially better. They give you a ton more units early on in a campaign. So for instance, as Yao Ming, you start with the tier 3 minor settlement, which gives you a lot of Jade Warrior recruitment, except Jade Warrior Crossbowmen with shields. Kind of a bit choice, but I guess you do have to give a reason to have this building, well, beyond Gate Masters, but still, you get a lot of Jade Warrior variants. But more importantly, you get a lot more choices at all the tiers, especially tier 2. So from the regular barracks, you get the Fearless Wall units. And these units are not just like, oh, discount Jade Warriors. No, they're actually in some ways quite different, or in certain specific ways different than Jade Warriors. They're not as tanky, but they do have armor piercing, they do have halberds, and they do not have crossbows, they have bows. So that gives you a kind of unit flexibility very early on. And remember, Xiao Ming does start with the minor tier 3 settlement, so that means a lot of things are available pretty damn quickly in this campaign. Like you can, for instance, get Wall, tier 3 Wall, which also gives you Imperial Road units, and Imperial Road units are rifles. So just the fact that I'm not spamming Jade Warriors and crossbows and instead have this kind of variety of units from the very beginning is freaking awesome. And of course, you do have your higher end units available as well. If there's anything I would criticize is I feel like Great Longbow Riders should not be a tier 5 unit. That's always felt silly. I mean, there is the Radius mod for Warband upgrades. That's really good, that's really awesome. Then you have various skill lines, changes, etc. Again, pretty damn good. Some things obviously do feel a bit redundant, but yeah, that's pretty good. Research tree, I think, is one of those areas where, yeah, that's on CA to change it. I mean, I understand the modders, like, why put all the effort to change the research tree if CA is going to do another Cathay DLC? At one point, we would have expected it by now and change the research tree themselves, and then they have to do it all over again. I get that, but yeah, the Cathay and research tree is not great. With regards to it, all the inherent problems, I mean, it does fix that early game issue, but there's still obviously certain issues with Cathay, and that's the point of these videos. You know, I highlight what works, what doesn't, what I think they could work on, all that. So caravans feel redundant, except items, research tree, all that, and the compass is a worthless piece of crap. it's always been a worthless piece of crap. It's like, oh, the choice you have with the compass is either get casualty replenishment or I get control. And we'll talk about casualty replenishment in just a second, but control is kind of one of those things. You can get a decent amount of control as Cathay, but, you know, Radius has this aspect where you do have difficulty level modifiers, Confederation control modifiers, and then when you lose control, you constantly get low control. So you have the choice. Either I get a lot of controlled buildings, which not really great, or, and I hate that since Rome too, for the record. So it's not like this is new. This has been the case, like, Grave Assembly changed that, but yeah. With regards to forcing people to get a lot of controlled buildings, or again, constant rebellions, which is like free experience and money. It's not like you have to get rebellions. It's more like you don't care, pretty much. It's just noise. And I'm not sure that's really the best play for that. I mean, it's like, what's the point of getting constant rebellions? That would be a big discussion in the history of Total War as a whole, forget any mod, but yeah, right? Like, the entire rebellion system just feels like cheap. The one problem I would definitely say with regards to Cathay, and the one thing I really wish modders fixed, and I don't think any of them has, for the record, is the lack of a casualty replenishment hero. The reason a casualty replenishment hero matters so much is not just in the idea that you get a casualty replenishment hero that gives you benefits. It's more like, I don't have to fight battles that I know I'll win, right? And that's kind of the point. You do end up with a lot of scenarios of battles that you know you'll win, but because of the lack of a casualty replenishment hero, you end up having to fight a lot of these battles manually. Like, you have mobility, great. And that's on CA, by the way, because they never had the casualty replenishment hero. Like, Game Masters should have had it. But no, Astromancers give you scouting, Alchemists give you campaign movement range, and the Game Masters give you experience and a lot of fucking reduction in upkeep, or some level of reduction in upkeep. And yeah, you do end up in the situation where you have a ton of money as Cathay, even though you may maintain a huge, ridiculous number of armies. Now, in this case, I have a ton of money because I've been fighting a lot of battles, and with Radius being what it is, in the sense that enemies also have a far wider variety, more skill points, you actually get more post-battle loot, so the campaign pace. Like, this is the interesting thing. Radius doesn't just improve the late game. It improves every aspect of the game. Like, the early game, the mid game, the late game, just because inherently it makes things more interesting at every fucking step of the way. Which is like, that's the flaw that a lot of people talk about. They think that the late game is what matters, or the early game is what matters. Reality, and this is where I'd say it, yeah, I focus on the early game because that's where we are in Warhammer 3 right now. But I would also say the ideal scenario is where you have a good game flow, not inverted difficulty, but a proper end game, proper escalation in difficulty, proper end game crisis, but also a good and varied early game. And I think Cathay does manage to improve things in fairly substantial ways compared to the base game. Is it where I think it needs to be? I mean, the lack of a casualty replenishment hero is obviously one of the glaring problems. Also, you know, every other issue that Cathay has by default in the game. But that's the problem. Mods are not fixes for fundamental game issues. They add things, or they make things cooler. It's like, some people have this perspective, mods fix the game. Rarely do they do so. I mean, they do improve things, but fundamental core gameplay issues can only be fixed by CA, and that's kind of where I'll end it. It's much better than the base game, but it's still Cathay. And it's much better in the one area where Cathay is really lacking, or in terms of where Cathay is really boring in the base game, which is the early game, but it's still Warhammer 3 with all those core issues. That's all I had to say. Kostin signing out.